You might think that the UK is pretty safe to visit. With its lack of extreme weather or natural disasters and its mostly harmless wildlife, you could be fooled into thinking that you're completely free from danger here in the UK. But tourists beware, I wouldn't stray too far off the beaten path if I was you, or you might just find yourself in one of these unfortunate places. Our trip begins with a visit to one of England's many gardens. Britain has umpteen beautiful gardens open to the public. For a small fee, you can lose yourself amongst pristine hedgerows, blooming flower beds and lush greenery. But some of these idyllic gardens feature a well-maintained dark side. First on our list, at number 10, is the Poison Garden at the Alnwick Gardens. Located in Northumberland by the Scottish border, the gardens are next to the impressive Alnwick Castle, which was the setting for the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in the famous and much-loved Harry Potter books and films. Although both are separate attractions requiring their own tickets, the gardens are gorgeous and well worth a visit for any nature lover. There's also a magnificent treehouse and plenty to do and explore here. Protected by large Gothic black iron gates sits the Poison Garden. It's the home to about 100 toxic plants. For visitor safety, this deadly garden is only accessible with a tour guide. Smelling, touching and tasting the plants is also strictly off limits for rather obvious reasons. The Poison Garden is fascinating. The most deadly plants are kept in large medieval-looking cages and the rest are displayed beautifully. Although no one has ever been seriously hurt or has died here, occasionally visitors have been known to pass out due to the toxic fumes in the Poison Garden. So if you are going to visit, make sure you stick with your tour guide and don't get too close. Number 9. Beck Pier. The UK has some pretty famous piers, including the first pier ever built in 1812 on the Isle of Wight, and Southend Pier, which is the longest pier in the world at 2,158 metres in length. It takes around 30 minutes to walk to the end. The Victorians' fascination with the seaside started in around the 1870s, when bank holidays were introduced, and salt water was proclaimed to be a cure for a vast array of diseases and ailments. Many seaside resorts were built and were hugely popular at the time. Piers were originally created for practical purposes, but quickly became a way for the Victorians to show off their engineering skills and prove that they had mastered the sea. The piers allowed them to feel as though they were walking on water. Tourists would flock to the seaside towns to relax and take in the fresh sea air and healing properties of the sea. But by the 1960s, popularity began to dwindle. As air travel took off, more Brits started to holiday abroad. As the numbers dropped, many resorts closed and were demolished or left to become run down. The piers themselves are difficult and expensive to maintain, and many were damaged during the war. Others have suffered fires and storm damage over the years. Some of them aren't exactly up to modern safety standards, Beck Pier being one of them. Located in Weston-super-Mare, Somerset. The pier opened in 1867 and is one of only 6 Grade 2 listed piers surviving today, making it an historical landmark. It closed to the public in 1979 and has basically been left to rot, with redevelopment proposals failing to take off and ownership changing often. In 2015, storms caused further damage, leading part of the pier to collapse into the rocks below. You'd think it would be basic common sense that this particular pier isn't suitable for your afternoon stroll, but you'd be surprised. In recent years, numerous YouTube explorers and curious visitors have needed to be rescued from this dangerous structure. During the pandemic lockdowns, lifeboats were being sent out multiple times a week to rescue people who had gotten themselves stranded on the pier or on the island it connects to. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution's advice is to never attempt to cross Beck Pier or to access Beck Island by any means. The 8th most dangerous place on our list is the SS Richard Montgomery. Located on the Isle of Sheppey, Kent. The SS Richard Montgomery was built during World War II. It was a US Liberty ship and was constructed in 1943 by the St. John's River Shipbuilding Company in Florida. In 1944, the Montgomery was loaded up with 7,000 tons of munitions and set sail for Britain. She arrived in the Thames estuary and dropped anchor, awaiting the arrival of a convoy before planning to head across the English Channel. But on the 20th of August 1944, the ship became grounded on a sandbank. Frantic attempts to unload the ship's deadly cargo were hindered by its rapidly deteriorating condition. By the next day, a crack had formed in the hull and the ship had become flooded. The salvage effort continued until the 25th of September, until bad weather and the dangerous conditions forced Navy divers to stop. The wreck of the Montgomery still remains there to this day, with a 7-metre-high pile of explosives, an estimated 10,353 bombs still dangerously trapped inside its cargo hold. It's too risky to attempt to dismantle, and so far the only means of managing the situation has been to regularly survey the area, keeping a close eye on the rate of deterioration. A strict exclusion zone is in place around the shipwreck, but it is easily visible, with 3 prominent masts poking out of the water at both low and high tide. Any disturbance or damage to the ship could cause its dangerously unstable cargo to detonate with an explosive mass of 1,400 tons of TNT. It was calculated that if the shipwreck were to explode, it would throw a 300-metre wide column of water and debris nearly 3,000 metres into the air and generate a 16-foot high wave. It's said that it would shatter every window in nearby Sheerness and damage local oil and gas facilities. Thousands of local residents could die or suffer injuries, and millions of pounds of damage would occur. Worryingly though, recent surveys have revealed that the ship's 3 masts are decaying rapidly, and that if they were to collapse, they could cause the wreck to detonate. The Ministry of Defence even offered to pay £5 million to any company that could safely remove the masts, but no takers. If the worst were to happen and the ship were to explode, the scale of the blast would be one of the biggest non-nuclear explosions in the world. The 7th most dangerous place on our list is Merlins Cave. Located in Cornwall, the cave sits beneath Tintagel Castle. The area is breathtakingly beautiful and enriched with history and Arthurian legend, attracting an estimated 250,000 visitors each year. It's said that the cave was once occupied by the legendary King Arthur's advisor and magician Merlin, giving it its name. Merlin's Cave is 100 metres in length and passes right through Tintagel Island, with openings either side. The cave's stunning location and mystical history makes it a must-visit location for anyone travelling to the area. But be warned, it is only safe to visit Merlin's Cave at low tide. Merlin's Cave is a very dangerous place to get stuck at high tide. It fills with water, with the waves crashing in from both sides, creating a strong current against jagged rocks. It's advised not to swim in Merlin's Cave because of these dangers. Even confident swimmers can get into difficulty. In May 2019, a talented young musician drowned in the cave after going for a morning swim. His body was discovered by a couple out walking close to the cave's entrance at the next low tide. Police said that he was described as being a competent swimmer, and his death was deemed a tragic accident. His guitar and towel was found on the beach nearby. If you decide to visit this popular tourist spot, make sure you check for the up-to-date tide times as they change regularly. Follow all signage and advice, and never attempt to access Merlins Cave at high tide. The sixth most dangerous place to visit on our list is British theme parks. It's estimated that over 35 million people visit British theme parks each year. Accidents are rare, but the UK has had its fair share of theme park disasters over the years. Some of the biggest and most popular UK parks have been the place of some terrible accidents. Alton Towers in Staffordshire is the biggest theme park in the UK and features 10 record-breaking roller coasters. One of these coasters is the Smiler, holding the world record for most inversions, featuring 14 of them. The ride was built in 2013, but just 2 years after opening, there was a serious incident. In June 2015, disaster struck when a train carrying 16 guests plummeted into an empty stationary carriage. An empty test train went around the track but stalled due to the high winds, stopping at the bottom and not making it back into the station. An automatic safety block was triggered, and the other train carrying passengers was held at the top of a steep drop. It stayed there for 8 minutes until engineers manually overrode the system, thinking that it had stopped by mistake. This released the carriage, allowing it to roll into a head-on collision with the stalled carriage below. The 4 passengers on the front row suffered life-changing injuries, with 2 having to have leg amputations. It took 17 painful minutes after the crash for emergency services to finally be called. It was determined that 4 human errors had taken place, and that it's likely the crash would have been avoidable. Senior management were heavily criticised, and the park has implemented 30 changes since the incident. The Smiler still remains wildly popular at the park, with people still queuing for hours to ride. Then there's Drayton Manor theme park, famous for being the home of Thomasland. The park greets about 1.5 million visitors each year. It largely appeals to young children and families with their popular Thomasland area, which is based on the hugely successful adventures of Thomas the Tank Engine. The park also features a zoo and many thrill rides and coasters, including the Shockwave, which opened in 1994 and is the UK's only stand-up roller coaster. In 2017, disaster struck. An 11-year-old girl who was just enjoying a school trip tragically died in the park. She was riding the Splash Canyon River Rapids ride with 4 friends when she was flung from the boat they were in. It was said that she had stood up in an attempt to swap seats just as the boat picked up speed and hit a buffer, sending her flying into the water. The young girl then attempted to climb the conveyor belt to get back to her boat, but she slipped and fell into 5 feet of turbulent water below. She struggled as her friends screamed for help, but nobody came to help her out of the water, and there was no water rescue equipment around the ride. The poor girl was eventually dragged under by the current. Her terrifying ordeal went on for 18 minutes before they managed to get her out of the water, and she was airlifted to hospital, where she later died of her injuries. An investigation found that multiple failings had led to the girl's accidental death. The boats on the ride were old, and the safety signs on them were faded or missing, and no warnings were given by ride operators as guests boarded the boats. CCTV cameras, which were meant to be watched at all times to ensure guest safety, were only being monitored half of the time, with the member of staff viewing them also helping guests into boats and training another employee on that day. On top of that, the CCTV cameras were static and only 50% of the ride was covered. Staff are supposed to watch the CCTV and correct any dangerous behaviour they see by speaking to riders over a loudspeaker, reminding them to stay seated, as guest standing was a frequent occurrence. But on the day of the accident, the loudspeaker wasn't used once, despite investigators counting 70 incidences of riders standing between the ride opening that morning and when the girl fell in at 2 p.m. Staff only became aware that she was in the water after being alerted by another park guest. Ride operators also didn't have any water rescue or lifeguard training, and there was no rescue equipment around the ride. Even more horrifyingly, this wasn't the first or even the second time that someone had ended up in the ride's dangerous waters. There was a shocking 14 previous incidents of riders falling and ending up in the water, including a 10-year-old boy who had also been thrown from his boat in similar circumstances. Staff had also failed to notice him in the water, and he was luckily rescued by another park guest. Drayton Manor was fined £1 million for failings which could have prevented this terrible accident, but that went unpaid, with the company going into administration. The park now has new owners and has been revamped, and the River Rapids ride reopened in 2021. Many other big UK theme parks and fun fairs have also suffered numerous accidents and injuries, including Fort Park. In 1987, a young boy was thrown from the park's River Rapids ride and lost an ear. Then, in 2000, an 11-year-old boy fell out of the ride X, No Way Out. He fell out of the carriage he was in and broke both his legs and was left with permanent brain damage. Then, in 2014, a 14-year-old girl suffered injuries to her legs due to being crushed under the safety bar on the log flume ride. In 2018, a piece of the Vortex ride broke off mid-ride. Luckily, no one was injured on that one. But the list goes on and on. Camelot theme park, a 12-year-old boy sustained serious injuries after falling 30 foot from the Excalibur ride. A fairground worker also died there in 2004 after being hit and dragged along by a roller coaster carriage. Then there's the Battersea Park Funfair disaster in 1972. 5 children died and 13 others were injured when a train came off the tracks of a wooden roller coaster, as well as many other tragic events over the decades. The 5th most dangerous place on our list is lakes and reservoirs. 75% of fatal drownings in the UK happen at inland water sites such as lakes, quarries, rivers and reservoirs. Experts advise people not to swim in reservoirs, no matter how tempting they may be. But yet every year when Britain gets a heatwave, people flock to these dangerous areas in their droves. The dangers might not be immediately apparent, but the calm and picturesque water isn't safe. There's often hidden dangers lurking below the surface, like old machinery and strong underwater currents which aren't visible before you jump in. Some reservoirs contain pumps and unsafe structures, like Lady Bower Reservoir in Derbyshire, which features 2 giant shaft spillways known as plug holes. They were created over 70 years ago to help excess water escape into the nearby river. After heavy rains, the water in the reservoir rises and spills over the tops of the giant circles. Each one has a 78-foot diameter and a 66-foot drop straight down. You do not want to get sucked into one of these. If you do manage to survive the initial fall in, you'll get caught in the grill in the tunnel, never making it to the river. Rescue would also be very difficult. Boating and fishing is allowed in the reservoir, but swimming or going near to the plug holes is forbidden. Despite the obvious danger, boats have been known to get dangerously close to the plug's edge. There was reports recently of fishermen foolishly lingering less than a couple of meters away. People have also been reported climbing on them to pose for selfies, risking their lives and the lives of the rescue workers who'd have to retrieve them if they fell in. Another popular summer spot that was regularly plagued with visitors is Harper Hill Quarry, also known as the Blue Lagoon. Don't be fooled by its tranquil appearance or by glamorous social media photos you might see of it. This quarry has been described as probably being the most dangerous water in the UK. It's a disused limestone quarry, and its gorgeous blue colour, which gives it the illusion of being a beautiful Caribbean beach, is caused by toxic chemicals, an unappealing mix of seeping minerals and rain. This gives the water the same pH scale as bleach and can cause severe skin and eye irritation, infections, and stomach issues. As well as this, the quarry lake is known to contain dead animals, car wrecks, and heaps of hazardous waste, and is a highly dangerous place to swim. Yet it's estimated that thousands of visitors flock to the site each summer, some silly enough to swim in the water, ignoring the many safety signs in place. It's been such a problem that local authorities have resorted to dyeing the tropical turquoise water black in an attempt to make it less appealing. In 2013, 2016 and 2020, the Blue Lagoon was dyed an unattractive murky black colour. But it seems it's still not enough to keep some people away. Similar problems have been growing in the Lake District over recent years. A rise in the numbers of drunk swimming and remote partying has led to the rising numbers of tragic water incidents. Water sports equipment like paddleboards have also become more readily available, with many now being sold cheaply in supermarkets. But without proper instruction, safety measures and training, people are getting into difficulties and even dying. Stricter measures on the sale of these items are being called for, and awareness is being raised of the potential dangers. Between 2013 and 2020, over 1,200 people drowned in inland bodies of water. Number 4. British beaches. In the UK, over 60% of RNLI incidents involved rip currents. As soon as the hot weather hits, thousands of holidaymakers swarm to the British coastline. Most have a perfectly lovely day at the seaside, but for some, the day can end in tragedy. In 2019, the Coast Guard urged beachgoers to take care after experiencing 9 deaths in just 10 days. August is the most deadly month. With the school summer holidays and scorching heat waves, the beaches are busier than ever, with incidents happening multiple times a day at popular beaches. Visitors can easily get caught out by dangerous rip currents, fast rising tides, and sinking quicksand, leaving them needing to be rescued. Just recently, on the 31st of May 2023, 2 children lost their lives at Bournemouth Beach, with 8 others also needing rescuing. They were believed to have been caught by a rip current and swept from a sandbank. In June 2021, 11 people needed rescuing after being swept out to sea by a rip current on a beach in Norfolk. It was one of many incidents that weekend. Rip currents, often incorrectly referred to as riptides, occur when a strong moving channel of water forms. The current travels from the breaking waves at the shoreline far out to sea. Even in shallow water, it's not safe. It's said that standing at just hip height is deep enough to become completely helpless against a rip current's pull. Bournemouth remains to be a rip current hotspot as they regularly form near sandbars, piers and other structures. There are lifeguards stationed on the beach, but disaster can strike at any time. Other incidents involved unsuspecting members of the public being cut off by fast-moving high tides. In 2019, 5 friends tragically drowned near Camber Sands. They were playing football on a sandbank when the tide came in and the water rose around them. Their brother claimed they'd been overcome by quicksand. In 2016, a 2-year-old girl and her father both tragically died as their family was swept out to sea by waves in Cornwall. Always be aware of the dangers and only swim at beaches with lifeguards present and follow the safety signs and flags. If all this wasn't enough to already put you off of taking a dip, it was reported that in 2022, water companies poured raw sewage into the rivers and seas for a whopping 1.75 million hours. The charity Surfers Against Sewage have warned the public against using 83 beaches, including one of TripAdvisor's best rated because the sewage has become so bad. There's even reports of radioactive material being found in waters in Scotland and Cumbria, as well as on the Suffolk coast, thought to have come from the nearby Sizewell nuclear power station. Number 3 on our list of most dangerous places in Britain is the River Wharf. Local legend says that this river has a 100% death rate for those who are unfortunate enough to fall in. It's so deadly, it has often been labelled as the most dangerous river in the entire world, listed alongside the likes of the crocodile-infested Nile and the piranha-filled Amazon. It's also been dubbed the river that swallows people, not quite what you would expect from an innocent-looking river in the quiet English countryside. Located in Yorkshire, the river originates in the beautiful Yorkshire Dales and travels 65 miles down to Bolton Abbey. Some parts of this long river are deemed perfectly safe, and one area was even made England's first official river bathing spot in 2021. But be warned, parts of this river are deadly. The most dangerous section is located near to the ruins of Bolton Abbey. It's here where a harmless-looking, narrow stretch of river has claimed the lives of many unlucky visitors. The narrow point is less than 2 meters wide and appears to be an easy spot to jump across the river. But there have been many recorded deaths here. Its closeness to the other side makes it also tempting for people to try and hop the gap, without being fully aware of the danger that lurks beneath. Although on the surface it appears calm and unsuspecting, it's deceptively deep, reaching up to 65 meters in places. That's longer than 2 blue whales. Combine this enormous depth with wet, slippery rocks and a fierce hidden undercurrent which drags you down and stops you from resurfacing. Due to the force created as the river narrows, it's said to be inescapable. Many poor souls have tragically lost their lives here over the centuries. The exact death toll is not known, but one of the oldest recorded incidents happened way back in 1152. The landowner's young son slipped and died whilst trying to jump across to the rocks on the other side. His grieving mother then gave the land to monks so that they could pray for the soul of her child. In September 1934, local watercolour artist Arthur Reginald Smith went out for one of his regular painting sessions, and it ended up being his last. The artist's easel and paints were found on the rocks right by the river's most dangerous stretch. It was said that during his art explorations, Arthur would often cross the river at this fateful spot. Then in August 1998, a honeymooning couple went for a walk by the Abbey and never returned. An inquest revealed that there had been heavy rain the night before, and that the river water had rapidly rose by up to 5 feet in under 60 seconds on the day. It's likely that the unsuspecting newlyweds wouldn't have had time to react and get themselves to safety. But the sorrow doesn't stop there. Disaster struck again in 2010 as a family celebrated an 8-year-old's birthday party. This time, the tragedy unfolded in a different section of the river, on a path of inviting stepping stones by an idyllic picnic spot next to Bolton Abbey. The 8-year-old birthday boy and his 13-year-old brother were attempting to cross the stepping stones when both of them ended up in the river. The older brother managed to climb out, but devastatingly, he couldn't rescue his younger brother. He said he didn't realise how dangerous or how deep the river was. Legend has it that every time the river claims a life, that a ghostly apparition of a white horse appears galloping down the side of the river. The second most dangerous place on our list is Ben Nevis. Located in Scotland, it's the highest mountain in the UK and stands at 4,000 feet above sea level. Ben Nevis was once an active volcano, but there's no risk of an eruption as it exploded and collapsed in on itself around 350 million years ago. The mountain today is all that remains. Sat in the breathtakingly beautiful Scottish Highlands, it attracts over 150,000 walkers every year and is part of the popular Three Peaks Challenge. It's roughly a 4-mile trek to the top and around 8.5 miles to the top and back down again. It takes an average of 8 hours to climb and descend the mountain. The main route and the safest way up is known as the pony track. It's a zigzagging path which was once used by the mountain ponies to carry supplies to the top. At the summit sits the Ben Nevis Observatory, which opened in 1883 but is now long abandoned. The observatory remains the highest structure in Britain still today. It's a relatively safe trek if you've come properly prepared for the conditions. The problem is people turning up with the false belief that Ben Nevis is an easy stroll. Every year, ill-prepared visitors arrive, hungry for summit selfies, with no experience or supplies. Unsuspecting families head out for what they think will be a hill walk to find themselves in danger, needing to be rescued. In 2022, mountain rescue volunteers attended 73 call-outs to Ben Nevis, with 9 reported deaths that year alone. Visitors don't realise just how treacherous Ben Nevis can be, some seemingly unaware of the conditions that they'll encounter. The temperature at the summit is usually 8 degrees colder than that at the base, and there's snow on the mountain for most of the year, with temperatures getting as low as 5 degrees Celsius in the winter and only reaching around 18 degrees Celsius in the summer. Even setting off on a warm summer's day, you'll still encounter cold, windy conditions the higher up you go. You'll also likely experience rain, with Ben Nevis receiving 171 inches of rainfall each year. This makes the rock-covered ground wet and slippery to walk on. People slipping is a common cause of injury. Visibility is also low, with cloud coverage, mists and fog that get worse the higher up you go. You can find yourself in whiteout conditions. People can easily stumble off the path they're walking on and struggle to find it again, leaving them helplessly wandering around the mountain and its dangerous hidden drops and edges. Trips and falls happen often, resulting in people needing to be rescued, with many fatalities occurring every year. There's some particularly dangerous points on the mountain where many new and experienced climbers have got into difficulty or even lost their lives. Adventure seekers are often lured to the mountain's more thrilling north face, a challenging route that should only be tackled by experienced climbers. Paths nearing the summit have visitors walking extremely close to the cliff's edge, and the harsh winds can batter walkers off the trail and over the 2,000-foot drop. It's very easy to lose your footing on the wet, stony paths and slip over the edge. There's also treacherous gullies to contend with. You have to walk past the notorious Five-Finger Gully, with the path narrowing between it and the cliff's edge, even sloping towards the gully, making it very dangerous in wet and icy conditions. In July 2021, it was even reported that Google Maps were incorrectly directing visitors to a highly dangerous and potentially fatal route up the mountain. Mountaineering charities have criticised Google for potentially directing climbers straight over the edge of a cliff. It draws attention to the need to do your own research and preparation. Don't just rely on your modern technology to keep you safe. Plan out your route and your starting location long before you set off. Don't climb this mountain on a whim. Come with correct clothing, footwear, climbing gear and supplies, and always check the weather conditions. Taking the top spot on our list, in first place, is Beachy Head. As if you needed another reason to avoid the British coastline. Beachy Head is located in Eastbourne. It's the highest chalk sea cliff in Britain, standing at 531 feet above sea level. Unfortunately, it's also the UK's and one of the world's most notorious suicide spots. It's been estimated that over 500 people have died at this spot since 1965, with around 20 deaths happening each year. Not all of these deaths are attributed to suicide though. There's plenty of accidental deaths at this location too. The cliff edges are unsteady and suffering from coastal erosion. Large chunks become loose and collapse unexpectedly. If you're unfortunate enough to fall, it's said to take 5 full seconds before you hit the rocks below. A truly terrifying thought. Yet this doesn't stop visitors from getting dangerously close to the edge, posing for risky photos and gambling with their lives. In 2017, a Korean student died at the cliffs nearby after asking a passerby to photograph her jumping in the air by the cliff's edge. It's very easy to lose your footing or trip on a bump in the ground, then there's nothing you can do to save yourself. The dreaded cliffs have also been the place of many awful murders over the years. In March 2018, the tragic news broke of a man jumping from the cliff with his 2 young sons. It was later found that he had murdered his wife. Beachy Head is also close to the site where the singer Nick Cave's 15-year-old son tragically lost his life in 2015. He was just out having a good time with friends. Him and some mates had taken LSD and devastatingly he fell from the cliff they were on. Beachy Head is so dangerous and so well known for suicides, it's almost constantly patrolled by charity workers who do their best to identify and intervene potential jumpers. It's crucial work that has saved many lives. The heartbreaking stories here are endless and still continue to this day, so please, if you do decide to visit to take in the breathtaking views and sea air, stay well back from the cliff edge. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe.